everyone and welcome back to Nomad Programming. In today's video, we'll pick up where we left off, covering a few more structural and semantic text elements. But before we dive in, if you're enjoying the channel's content, please don't forget to like and subscribe. Your support means a lot for the channel's growth, and feel free to leave any questions or suggestions in the comment section below. Without further ado, let's get started. In our previous video, we covered several essential structural and semantic text elements and their different uses. In this video, we'll continue exploring these elements to ensure you have a solid understanding of the key semantic text elements you need to build effective web pages. Alright, the first semantic text element we will begin with is the strong element. The strong element is used to give text strong or importance, typically displayed in bold. It signifies that the enclosed text is important, conveying emphasis to both users and screen readers, for example, emphasizing keywords within headings or sections, or highlight warnings or crucial instructions, or even important terms. Use the strong element when you want to highlight text that carries extra importance or should stand out in the content. Now, over VS Code over here, I'm going to add a new section that will contain the example for the strong element. I will add the H2 element and just type in between strong element. Now I'm going to add the paragraph element, and for example, I'm going to type please, then I'm going to add the strong element. As you can see, the strong element have a closing tag and an opening tag also. In between, I'm going to type do not share, and I will continue by typing your password with anyone. So it is important that you do not share your password with anyone. So this do not share phrase, as you can see, it is displayed in bold. Now use the strong element only when text needs to be emphasized for importance, not just to make it bold. Adding strong too frequently and unnecessary can reduce its effectiveness. Second, we have the emphasis element. Now the emphasis element emphasizes text usually displayed in italics. It implies stress or importance, helping convey subtle emphasis that may change the meaning or tone of the text. Use the emphasis element on words or phrases that affect the content's tone, especially when emphasis is essential to the reader's understanding. Now I'm going to create a new section to add the emphasis element within this section. I'm going to add the H2 element and type emphasis element. Now I'm going to add a paragraph element, and for example, I'm going to type we, then I'm going to add the emphasis element. As you can see, it has an opening and a closing tag, and in between I'm going to type strongly recommended. Afterwards, I'm just going to add reading the guidelines before proceeding. Now you can see the phrase strongly recommended on the page. It is displayed in italic. This emphasizes a tone of importance that the users should read the guidelines before proceeding, for example. Now use the emphasis element to convey stress that impacts the meaning or tone. You might be wondering now that the strong element and the emphasis element, well, are kind of the same. The strong element and the emphasis elements in HTML are indeed similar in that they both convey emphasis, but there are key differences in their semantic meaning and intended use. So here are key differences between both elements. First, we have the semantic meaning. The strong element is for strong emphasis or importance. It implies that the content is significant or urgent and should be highlighted as essential. On the other hand, the emphasis is typically used for text that should be stressed or differentiated in tone. Both of these elements have different visual styles as well. The strong element usually displays text in bold, and the emphasis element usually displays text in italic. Impact on accessibility. Both elements enhance accessibility by instructing screen readers to emphasize the text. However, the strong element implies a more serious emphasis or priority, while the emphasis is subtler, conveying just a shift in tone or stress. Now I'm going to add two more examples for both of these elements so you can understand the differences between them. Inside of the strong elements section, I'm going to add a new example to warn someone about a critical issue. For example, I'm going to type the paragraph element. I'm going to add the strong element and type warning. Then afterwards, I'm going to type do not touch the wires when the machine is on, for example. In this example, the strong element indicates urgency as the information is vital. Next, I'm going to head to the emphasis section over here and I'm going to add a paragraph element. And for example, I'm going to add I told him I wanted, and I'm going to add an emphasis element, and in between I'm going to type chocolate, and then I'm going to add ice cream, not vanilla, for example. Here the emphasis element adds stress to chocolate for clarification, but it's not necessarily urgent or critical. Now use the strong element when the text needs to stand out for importance, urgency, or seriousness, while the emphasis when you want to add subtle stress, tonal emphasis, or to differentiate certain words in tone. Now we have a new element, which is the delete element. The delete element represents text that has been deleted or removed from the document. This element shows modifications to content with deleted text, often displayed with a strike-through. Use the delete element to indicate revisions, corrections, or remove text in content, especially in documents where tracking changes is important. Now I'm going to add a new section to add the delete element example. I'm going to add an H2 element and type delete element. Now I'm going to type the paragraph element and type, for example, original price. Then I'm going to add the delete element. As you can see, it have an opening and a closing tag. I'm going to type $50, for example, and then I'm going to add now it is in $25, for example. So as you can see, the delete element used to indicate price changes. You can see this kind of usage on many websites. Using the delete element without providing context for why the text was removed can be confusing for users, as it may appear as unexplained strike-through text. It's best practice to include context or an explanation, especially if the removed information has been replaced or updated. For example, if a downloadable link has been updated, you could use the delete element to indicate the old link, followed by the insert element for the new one. And this brings us to the new element, which is the insert element. So the insert element denotes text that has been inserted into a document, often displayed with an underline. It highlights new additions to content, making updates and revisions clear. Use the insert element to signify added text in updates or document revisions, especially where tracking changes is helpful. So I'm going to add a new section for the insert element, and I will add an H2 element, and I'm just going to type insert element. Now I'm going to add an example over here. I'll just type the paragraph element and type the previous version is no longer available, for example, and then I'm going to add a delete element and type in between download version 1, for example, and then afterwards please use the updated versions, and I'm going to add the insert element. Now this insert element element is a new download link. So I'm going to add an anchor element. I'm just going to type new link, for example, and in between I'm going to type download version 2. Now this also goes for the insert element as well. Give context. Why is that content added or inserted? Alright, next we have the pre element. The pre element displays pre-formatted text, preserving white space and line breaks. It allows text to appear exactly as typed, useful for displaying code or formatted content. Use the pre-formatted element for content where spacing, alignment, or line breaks are essential, like code blocks or structured data. Now I'm going to add a new section for the pre-element example, and I'm going to add an h2 element and type pre-element. Now before adding the pre-example, I just want to showcase that if I use the paragraph element, for example, and just type line 1. Now if I add a new line by hitting enter and just type line 2, you can see that even if I added a new line or space between text, it will always be displayed as one line, losing the intended formatting. Browsers render text as a continuous line unless the pre-element is added to preserve specific spacing and line breaks. Alright, now I'm going to delete all of that and I'm going to add the pre-element. So the pre-element have an opening and a closing tag. So I'm just going to type line 1, add a new line, and I will add line 2. You can see how is it being displayed. I'm going to add another line, line 3, for example. So you can see how these lines are displayed on the page. It preserved its intended format. Now using the pre-element for general text instead of code or structured content like poetry, for example, it will lead to inconsistent spacing. Now you might be wondering why we already have an element that displays code. Why do we use the pre-element? Now the difference between the pre-element and the code element. The pre-element is primarily used for displaying text exactly as written, which includes white space and line breaks. It's common in cases where format preservation is essential, for example, code blocks or poetry. On the other hand, the code element, which I have explained in a previous video, specifically denotes a snippet of code and is an inline element, meaning it does not affect spacing or line breaks, typically used within the pre-element for larger blocks or in its own for shorter inline code within a sentence. So use the pre-element when you want to format strictly preserved and the code element for marking actual code content. Both can be combined when you want to format larger code blocks within the pre-element. Okay, now a new element, the small element. The small element is used to reduce the font size of text, often for legal disclaimers or fine print. It indicates less prominent text, usually secondary information or notes. Use the small element for disclaimers, legal notes, or supplementary information that doesn't need to dominate the main content. Now I'm going to add a new section for our small element example. I'm going to type the h2 element and I'm just going to type small element. Now I'm going to add a paragraph element. You usually see these small elements, for example, in terms and conditions. So I'm just going to add terms and conditions apply. Then I'm going to add the small element. It has an opening and a closing tag. In between, I'm going to type see full details on our website. You can see on the page how the phrase see full details in our website is displayed in a smaller font. Alright, another other element, we have the break element. The break element creates a line break within text, moving content to the next line without creating a new paragraph. It allows text to continue on the next line, useful for single line spacing in poems, addresses, or form inputs. Use the break element for short intentional breaks in text, but avoid overusing it in structured content where paragraphs might be more appropriate. So I'm going to add a new section over here. I will be using the break element inside an address element. So over here, I'm going to type the address element, which I already explained in my previous video, and I'm going to type the line 1, for example, 1 to 3, and I'm going to type the break element. So the break element has only an opening tag, it doesn't have a closing tag. Now we have created a new line. I'm just going to add the city name, for example, and as you can see on the page, it created a new line. Here are a few reasons to avoid overusing the break element. The break element is often misused to create spacing or structure content. Using CSS, for example, the margin or the padding element for spacing is more flexible and maintains separation between content and presentation, which aligns with best practices. Accessibility. The screen readers interpret break element as a line break, which can disrupt the flow of users relying on these tools. Screen readers will pause briefly at each break element, which can be confusing if the line breaks are frequent or unnecessary. Harder maintenance. Using multiple break element tags to create spacing can become messy and make the code harder to read or maintain. If the layout needs to be adjusted later, you may have to modify multiple break elements, which can be error-prone and inefficient. Finally, we have the span element. I know one would say it is not a semantic or structural text element. The span element is often grouped with semantic and structural text elements in discussions because while it doesn't inherently add meaning or semantics, it is frequently used to apply structure and styling to inline text, aiding in readable, accessible, and organized markup. So why the span element is grouped with semantic and structural elements. Inline structure. The span element is primarily used to isolate or group portions of inline text, making it easier to add specific styling, JavaScript functionality, or accessibility features without affecting the structure of the text around it. Supporting semantic through attributes. While the span element itself is not semantic, it becomes powerful when combined with attributes like class attribute and roles. These attributes can help provide additional information for accessibility tools and browsers, aiding both structural and interpretation, enhancing readability and accessibility. Although the span element is generic, it is a fundamental tool for organizing content inline without imposing extra formatting or layout shifts. It allows you to define logical parts of content for targeted styles or actions, which can improve the readability of the code and accessibility for screen readers when properly annotated. When to use the span element. Use the span element in cases where you need a container for inline content but don't want to create a line break or change the block structure. For example, highlighting specific words or phrases, adding icons or symbols alongside text, or providing alternative content for screen readers. So to add emphasis without using semantic tags like strong or emphasis, which may change the meaning, the span element can be used with class-based styling. So over here, I'm going to add a new section for the span element example. I'm going to add an h2 element and type span element. Now I'm going to add a new paragraph. I'm just just going to type the cat is, and I will add a span element, type very cute in between. As you can see, it has an opening and a closing tag, and then I will add and playful, for example. So as you can see, nothing happened in here. There are no changes on the very cute phrase, but I want to highlight the very cute phrase in a special way. So in this example, I will add a class attribute to style the phrase very cute. So in the span element, I will add the class attribute and I will name this class highlight, for example. So the class attribute is a special way of labeling HTML elements, allowing us to apply specific styles or effects to them. So here I added the class highlight to the span element tag to mark this part of the text. Now within the head element, I will add the style element. There are different ways to add the style or the CSS to your HTML code. I will explain all that in another video in details. For now, all you need to know is that the class attribute connects with the CSS, which stands for Cascading Style Sheets, a language that helps us style our HTML. By giving this span element a class, we can apply special design instructions to any text. Although we'll dive deeper into CSS in later videos, here's a quick overview of how it works in CSS. We use something called a selector to target elements. In this example, the highlight is a selector targeting anything with the class highlight. We'll explore selectors in more detail soon, but for now, just know that the class attribute helps us style specific parts of a web page. I'll break down CSS in more details later on, so don't worry if it seems new right now. Okay, so I'm going to add the selector.highlight and I'm going to add a border to add the pink frame around the text, and I'm going to add slightly around the corners. So I'm going to add the border radius over here, and we need spacing around the text. So I'm going to add padding, and I'm going to add a background color, for example, light pink background for a soft look. And now I'm going to add the font style, which is the font family over here, and I will make the text to stand out more a bit. So I'm going to add the font weight bold. As you can see, we added the bold style, not the element strong, for example. And now I'm going to add a color for the font. It will be a pink text color, for example. Now position relative allows positioning for hearts because I'm going to add hearts, for example. This will ensure padding and border fit around the text. Now display inline block ensures padding and border fit around text. Alright, I'm going to head to our another style over here. Now dot highlight before and dot highlight after. I will add a heart before and after the phrase. So in the content, I will just add the heart emoji. Now the color, I will match the heart color with the text, and I'm going to add positions and a font size. Next, I'm going to add another style. We have dot highlight before. This will position the heart to the left, the first heart to the left, and then we will position the heart slightly above the text, and so as the after or the second heart will position the heart to the right and slightly above the text. That this part of the text has special significance. As you can see how the phrase very cute. So we have covered the structural and semantic text elements. I hope the explanation was clear and easy to understand. In the next video, I will cover the next group, which is typography and formatting text elements. I hope you enjoyed today's video. Thank you all for watching.